And with that, we'll take two principal witnesses in opposition, and each will have 2 minutes to address the committee on AB 379. And if you could please sit on this end of the table, yes, thank you.
Do we need to press a button or anything?
You can if you like, ma'am.
Yeah, there's a button right
Testing.
there. I think it turns red when your mic is on. Thank you. And whoever would like to begin,
Testing. Okay, it's working. Thank you. Good morning, Chair and committee members. Soma, Executive Director and co-founder of the Sidewalk Project, a lived experience organization that works with unhoused people in Skid Row, MacArthur Park, and the Figueroa Corridor. Our drop-in center in Skid Row serves unhoused and unstably housed cis and trans women, most of whom are street-based sex workers and survivors. I am also a queer sex worker and a survivor, and I lead from that wisdom. The last few days, my team and I have been on the front lines providing medic services in our beloved Los Angeles streets amidst mass kidnapping and violence from the feds. With that community safety effort fresh in my mind, I come to urge you to vote no on AB 379. This federal administration is battering my city because we refuse to hand our migrant neighbors over to unidentifiable goons who spit on the Constitution and due process. Amidst this climate, 379 will cause devastating harm, especially to migrant sex workers and survivors. In February, one of our members, Linda Moran, a trans woman of color, was held hostage and sex trafficked in a hotel in Pacoima. She called 911 for help. When LAPD arrived, they shot this survivor in the chest, handcuffed, and arrested her. I was with Linda when she passed away, and am witness to the horror of her death when she was just calling police for help. This is a law enforcement approach to sex trafficking. Amidst the grandstanding around safety for survivors, I have heard very little decision-maker understanding of the reality of survivor criminalization and deportation. As the U.S. military brutalizes civilians in LA, why are Democrats seeking to pass policy that will be leveraged by Trump? 379, which is likely a violation of Fourth Amendment protections against unreasonable searches and seizures, will oil the mass deportation machine to make easy the human trafficking of migrants into slave trades around the world. Including youth survivors. If you care about survivors and public safety, I beg of you to vote no on AB 379. Thank you.
Hi, I am Ashley Madness with Decrim Sex Work California, Sex Workers Outreach Project Los Angeles, and Artist Revolt. AB 379 would make it a deportable criminal offense to smoke a cigarette outside of a strip club. It would make it a deportable crime to circle the blocks too many times if there was a BDSM party going nearby. AB 379 would make it a deportable crime to walk to work as a porn producer or to wave out your window at somebody that you thought looked cute. AB 379 is built for abuse, and our data on the recently repealed law that criminalized the more specific conduct of loitering for purposes of committing prostitution provided by the ACLU show that the overwhelming majority of men charged with that previous offense were Hispanic or Black, and that the conduct required for such charges to be upheld often was as minimal as circling your block in your neighborhood. While AB 379 has been sold by law enforcement and morality crusaders as protecting victims of sexual violence, it makes everyone involved in the sex trade more vulnerable to violence and will directly result in more sexual violence, including sex trafficking, which sex worker survivors like myself know. That's why we advocate for decrim. AB 379 would explicitly make it a crime to associate with sex workers. That puts a target on our back as sex workers and as anybody who's trying to help out sex workers. It will give abusers, pimps, rapists, and traffickers more leverage over their victims and potential victims as clients have to rush negotiations because there's new penalty associated with being associated with a sex worker. while also letting law enforcement and local politicians permission to take credit for arresting people for consensual stuff instead of going after actual human traffickers by saying that they are very, very expensively funding services that are not going to organizations that, like Swap LA or other organizations that value sex workers, include sex worker survivors in our definition of who we serve. AB 379 is counterproductive to real solutions like adequately funding the basic housing and support services that people vulnerable to violence across the state, including youth, including trans people, including people of color, including immigrants, desperately need and cannot get. Please fund community-based and sex worker-led solutions like the Housing as Healthcare pilot grant program proposed by Decrim Sex Work California, and please do not make it a deportable offense to circle the block while in California. Please find the courage to vote no against AB 379. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're going to now take any Me Too testimony in opposition to AB 379. If you are in opposition to AB 379 and wish to express your position, you can please line up at the microphone, state your name, organization, and position on the bill.
Natasha Minsker, Smart Justice California, opposed unless amended.
Liz Blum-Gutierrez on behalf of the Debt-Free Justice Coalition, Los Angeles County Public Defenders Union, Local 148, and Law Defense and Respectful Opposition.
Good morning. Margot George on behalf of the California Public Defenders Association, opposed unless amended.
Melanie Kim, San Francisco Public Defender's Office, and on behalf of Initiate Justice Action in respectful opposition.
Good morning, Glenn Backus. I was asked by the Coalition to Abolish Slavery and Trafficking, the United States' largest anti-trafficking and service provider to sex workers and survivors in the United States, in opposition.
George Prampthu on behalf of ACLU California Action, Justice at Last, Swap Behind Bars, Woodhull Freedom Foundation, Center on Reproductive Rights and Justice at UC Berkeley Law, Harvey Milk LGBTQ Democratic Club, Equality New York, California Coalition for Women and Prisoners, Choose Your Path Foundation, Dionysus LLC, Swap LA, Artists Revolt, Black Women for Wellness Action Project, Decrim Sex Work California, and Californians United for a Responsible Budget, in respectful opposition. Thank you.
Samelia Rogers on behalf of the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights, in respectful opposition.
Ignacio Hernandez on behalf of the California Attorneys for Criminal Justice, Statewide Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, in opposition. Respectfully, of course.
Okay, thank you. Any other members of the public wish to express opposition to AB 379? Please approach the microphone. Is it support or oppose? Oppose. Okay. Okay, seeing no additional testimony, that completes testimony on the bill. The committee will now discuss the bill and will entertain motions after committee discussion. If there's a question directed to a particular witness, we'll take that witness testimony. Otherwise, it's now in order for the committee to discuss the bill. Who would like to begin discussion? Senator Wiener.
Yeah, first of all, just a question I want to just clarify, because of all the discussion for many years on these issues, I'd love to have a yes or no answer. Is loitering, will this loitering crime be a deportable, will it trigger immigration consequences? I don't know if the author can answer that, maybe the district attorney can answer that. That's not an aspect that I had focused on yet, because when I authored the loitering law repeal 4 years ago, we did not have a fascist in the White House trying to create a police state, and so so maybe I don't put you on the spot if you don't know, but I trust you, but I just want to see if we have agreement on that it is a deportable offense.
Bill author, want to direct it to you?
Through the chair, I would like to defer to our technical expert, our district attorney.
What I would ask to do is, when we have issues in regards to immigration consequences, what I do as a prosecutor is I contact my colleagues that specialize in immigration law, because I don't want to either say yes or no and in any way mislead the committee.
I get. Sorry,
but I can find out.
I understand that, but we're being asked to vote on this bill today, and you're here in support. I understand the solicitation piece is probably, I assume, is the primary reason you're here, I'm guessing. But we have this other piece of junk that's in the bill, the loitering, creation of a loitering law, that's always been ancillary. It's never been part of the real public discussion. The solicitation of minor piece has always been the focus of this bill, and it was a focus, of the assembly, other than the assembly members who said the loitering piece needs to come out of the bill, but it's still in there. And now we're hearing that it has deportation consequences, and I would like to know the answer to that, because I'm going to be honest with you, and I have broader remarks to make, that I understand the solicitation piece, especially with the changes that were made. And I'm going to talk about the history of the really gross history of how this issue over the last year and a half has moved through the legislature. But the loitering piece, it's a very different thing. And so if no one knows the answer to that other than our opposition witnesses, who I trust what you're saying, and maybe, if you want to elaborate.
So we are engaged in a 4-year research project with York University out of Canada, and we are tracking everything that's happening in Los Angeles, specifically on the Figueroa Corridor ahead of the Olympics. And what we have found is that young women of color are being charged as co-conspirators, and they themselves are victims and survivors. So we are especially concerned about survivor criminalization and survivor deportation. And I just learned recently that the United States is only has the capacity to process 10,000 of these survivor trafficking visas, and we have upwards of 300,000 per year that go unprocessed at a time when ICE is waiting outside of federal buildings, hopping out of bushes like they did in my city in Los Angeles, and kidnapping people who are trying to go through the process. So for a survivor who has been criminalized to go through that process and know that there's no pathway to that visa, we are absolutely going to see deportations as a result of this, loitering being one of those, but also criminalization of youth survivors.
Okay, Senator Wiener, back to you.
Okay. So if no one
So, Bill, author, you don't know.
What I would say, I'm actually getting my staff to check on the answer for you, Senator, but from my experience in the courtroom, generally speaking, deportable offenses fall into one of two categories. They're either aggravated felonies, most of the things that you would probably imagine, murder, mayhem, kidnapping, things of that nature, or what is categorized broadly as crimes of moral turpitude. I think the question would be, and we're checking the federal regs right now, is whether loitering, not the provision related to 16 and 17-year-olds, but whether the loitering provision would fall into that category of a crime of moral turpitude. So if you give me a few minutes, I'll try to get an answer for you.
Yeah, I think it probably does, but
It was the case with 357 that repealed a loitering for purposes of committing prostitution, which is a little bit differently worded than purchasing commercial sex, but that was a crime involving moral turpitude and potentially deportable. And I worked on some follow-up legislation, hopefully help those record clearings, but that was the case there. So unclear how it, you have to put it in front of a judge to test it this time, but the last one with similar language was definitely deportable.
And I would agree with that statement. I think it's to be determined. But yes, as it relates to the prior statute, I recall that as well. Yeah. Thank you.
What I would say as well is, in my experience in dealing with immigration consequences for post-conviction cases, because I did run that unit at one time, is it usually involves aggravated crimes of violence and moral turpitude. And so the issue will be on the moral turpitude nature of the crime itself. And usually that comes with dishonesty as an example of moral turpitude, the definition of that. When we are in court, whether a judge lets a particular piece of prior conviction come in or not, does it go to moral turpitude, a willingness to do evil, and goes to the credibility of the individual, whether they lie or not. So a lot of times the immigration consequences relate to untruthfulness, unwillingness to do evil, in the sense of an aggravated felony. So that's what it's going to eventually fall on, but that's been my experience in post-conviction cases.
Okay, I'll turn it back over to Senator Wiener.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to start all of this by acknowledging that the author and the chair and that everyone has been placed in a very difficult position about this bill with respect to the loitering piece of it. It, in my view, should have been removed in the Assembly. It wasn't. Should be removed in the Senate. And it's not being removed. I'm not being critical of the chair or the author. I think sometimes you take what's coming your way, and I know the author had to step in after this bill created a meltdown in the Assembly because of the original approach to the bill. And I know that the author tried, as Assembly Public Safety Chair, to fix this bill, and after everything unraveled, that work was undone. So I'm not criticizing you, and Mr. Chairman, I know you're a real champion for so many progressive criminal justice issues, and I appreciate that. I wanted to start by saying sometimes this, in this bill and on other bills, it becomes this, like, it framed as this debate, like, do you think human trafficking should be harshly punished, or do you not think it should be harshly punished? Everyone, I don't say everyone, but I think everyone in this room thinks that human trafficking should be harshly punished. Human traffickers are psychopaths who need to be harshly punished. And I think in the debate on this bill, I almost felt like when you would look at what's on social media, or even in the media, it was almost portrayed or implying that California had somehow like forgotten to ban trafficking of a minor, that the state had accidentally left that out of the penal code and that it was legal and we need to ban it. Of course, trafficking anyone, including a minor, has always been a felony for as long as maybe not forever, but probably for a very long time. And 2 years ago, initiating in this committee, we passed a law making trafficking of a minor, any minor, a strike, as in the 3 strikes law. It was the first new strike this legislature had created in decades. And so human trafficking, it is a stain on our society and a stain on the world. And I am so grateful for you coming forward and being able to talk about it. I can only imagine how painful that is. And for all the survivors out there who have, been involved with basically modern day form of slavery and having their agency taken away from them, we have to provide all the support in the world, and those traffickers need to be harshly held accountable. And it's unfortunate that in these debates, anyone who has, is taking any other perspective on a particular bill is somehow tarred as like you're protecting traffickers, you're pro-pedophile, whatever the case may be. When this issue, I'm going to focusing on the solicitation, first came to this committee a year and a half ago, almost, SB 1414, the original version of this bill, it said that any solicitation of a minor would be automatically a state prison felony, automatic sex offender registry, and removing the requirement that you knew or should have known that the person was a minor. It was over the top how that bill was drafted. We tried to reach an agreement with the author. We were unable to, and so we passed the bill out in modified form. The final bill that passed included all minors, but for 16 and 17-year-olds, there had to be evidence of trafficking. Because we know that in these situations, it can involve trafficking, absolutely, but not every situation. And because there was no age gap in that original bill, you could have situations with 2 high school seniors, and then the person is now being automatically labeled a trafficker, even if it was not a trafficking situation. And this is part of the challenge in this whole space, is that because of just the political atmosphere and the social media atmosphere and the way the press sometimes treats these issues, they make it impossible to have any kind of thoughtful, intelligent discussion, because everything just gets tarred as completely black and white, with understanding that when we write the penal code, we're writing it for 40 million people with a massive array of behaviors, ranging from the most horrific kind of behaviors to behaviors that most people would say that person should not be going to state prison. And yet, because of that toxic political environment around this issue, there's this constant push to treat everything as if everyone is, a psychopath. And that has significant consequences. People who end up having their lives destroyed, who most people would not want that to happen. After we resolved that last year, the original lead author of this bill introduced this bill to basically undo the resolution of the bill last year, and now here we are today. The solicitation piece of the bill, with the 3-year gap in it, I understand that approach. The loitering piece is much harder, and I appreciate the chair saying that the opportunity to deal with this, but honestly, the way to deal with this would be to remove it from the bill, and I'm frustrated that it's still in the bill. I've expressed that to the chair directly. I'm very frustrated that it's still in this bill, and now would be, or on the floor of the Senate or in appropriations, would be the time to remove it, not to have to do a new bill. And so I don't know if the chair has further thoughts on that. I don't want to put you on the spot, but that's just my perspective on how we should, or the author, on how we should be handling this. Loitering has a very bad history in terms of who gets targeted. The analysis did a good job of describing very innocent behaviors that could trigger this loitering law, having nothing to do with purchasing sex. And we know historically who gets targeted for loitering laws. And it's, queer people, it's people who, gay men who are in a park. We know how it gets used, and it should not be in this bill. And if Ms. Krell wants to introduce a standalone loitering bill next year, she has every right to do that, and that discussion can happen, but it should not be on this bill, sort of piggybacking on the soliciting issue, which is a very real issue that people are trying to solve. So I will stop there, and I just want to express my extreme frustration that the loitering piece is still in this bill.
Thank you, Senator Wiener. We've had, I think, several conversations about this bill, and particularly that aspect of the bill. And, I reiterate my commitment that I expressed at the beginning of the hearing to continue to work with you on this. I don't know if Senator Schultz has anything he wants to add.
I've already spent years
Yes.
repealing the loitering law. I'm not going to be introducing the bill and having to go through that again and have all the death threats and calling me a pedophile. And assembly members got to see a little taste of what I and others have dealt with for years when ads were run against them, basically calling them pro-pedophile for putting that 3 years in and doing what you did in the assembly. And so I'm not going to be one to do it. This isn't a situation where the legislature creates a mess and then I'm not going to come in and be the one to do that. I think the legislature as a whole needs to fix this mess, and the best way to fix it is to remove it from the bill. I'm repeating myself, and I'll stop.
Thank you. Senator Schultz, Mr. Chairman, do you want anything you want to add?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank the senator for his comments. Your points are well taken. You saw my head nodding in agreement, particularly when we saw what I would categorize as blatant misrepresentations of existing law, even being peddled by pretty reputable establishments in our media institutions. It's very unfortunate how the entire saga played out and how much misinformation was put out into the public space, as opposed to the nuanced, thoughtful policy approach that we need to have. What I would say is that with the loitering piece, your concerns are well taken. I would say that from my experience in the courtroom, oftentimes there's a dichotomy between well-intentioned law and the application of the law by law enforcement, or even as it's applied in the courtroom. I had hoped to present the bill actually on a different day so that we had more time to have some of these conversations before our hearing today. But I also understand the urgency and the need to send a strong message that we do stand with and for the survivors of sex trafficking. What my commitment would be to the chair and to you, Senator, is that I can't promise that there will be agreement at the end of the day, but what I can promise is a commitment to having a robust conversation in the weeks ahead to see if we can find common ground to clarify or improve that portion of the bill.
And is this going to appropriations? Yes.
I believe it is.
Okay. Okay. So because I do think the solicitation piece should move forward, I'm going to support moving it forward today. And the loitering piece needs to come out before it comes to the floor. And I think that's really important. And so I appreciate your commitment to that conversation between now and the next steps. Yeah.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Ciarto?
Thank you very much. And for everybody's edification, yeah, I was there also at the meeting where hostile amendments were applied to 1414 and took 16 and 17-year-olds out of the equation. And that's the biggest piece of this, is putting 16 and 17-year-olds, recognizing that they are indeed minors. And if they're being solicited, if A is paying B so he can have sex with C, and C is a minor, then we need to do something, because C is going down the wrong path, and we need to help C get back on the right path. And we're not going to be able to do that if we have this hands-off approach. And the hands-off approach is, we're not going to reduce the demand out there by holding people who create demand accountable. We're just going to let them keep the demand up, which means people have to work behind the scenes a little harder so that they can make sure that the 16 and 17-year-old minor aren't as noticeable to law enforcement when they get used. But the bottom line is, if you're out there and you're going to pay somebody to have sex, well, you damn well better make sure they're not 16 and 17 years old, because those are minors. We need to protect our kids. If they turn 18 and they want to turn it around and join the trade, well, there's other things that are out there that can help us deal with that. But once they're 18, that's there. But when they're 16 and 17-year-old, I don't care what they've been through. A lot of us have had hard childhoods. You're 16 and 17. You're kids. It's our job to protect them. And it's our job, if we have a problem where we are selling 16 and 17-year-olds, then we've got to give them something else to do besides sell their souls and their bodies for sex. That's what this is really about. So, I understand the consternation about, how are we going to discern whether the person that's driving around the block a few times and pulling over and having a chat and trying to price things out, whether that is and truly a John or not. There's always going to be discretion with our law enforcement. But they need to be able to do something to stop that part of it, or at least make it a little more risky on the side of the person that's out there trying to solicit. And if their goal is to solicit a minor for sex, you know what? They need to go to jail. I'm sorry. So for me, this is a little more watered down than when it started. I think what happened to 1414 a year and a half ago was abhorrent. And this is what they're doing to correct this. A Democrat brought this up. A Democrat was working on this. And there was still some blow up about it, because somehow we just don't want to include those 16 and 17-year-olds. It's not fair to them, right? Because we want them out there being able to sell their themselves to make a living. No, that's the time when we need to include them more, so that we can help save them. So anyway, I think it's rather clear where I stand on this bill. I will support it. I think there's enough in here to be able to make sure that the Johns, by the PD, when they all the police I know, and I've worked in areas, believe me, Imperial Highway, do I need to say anything more? I've worked in areas, the police are pretty darn good about figuring out who's who out there. They are. Is there abuse sometimes? Is there a mistake sometimes? Yep. But I'd rather make a mistake and rectify that mistake than to continue to just have this hands-off approach. Let it go wild and just pretend it's okay, because it's not.
So as we proceed with the discussion, I really appreciate everyone being here today. I ask that there be no applause or interruptions as the committee deliberates on the bill, so we can have an orderly discussion. Senator Caballero was next, and then I'll come back to you, Senator Wiener.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. There's so much emotion around all of this, and I really appreciate you all being here today because this is a difficult subject to take on. I have not been the author of these bills were for which the historical reference was given, but I was a co-author. I was a co-author on 1414, and I was a co-author originally on this bill as well. And I was a co-author because I feel exactly the same as my colleague in regards to the trafficking of minors. Human trafficking is abhorrent no matter what, but minors are particularly vulnerable. So I want to thank you all for sharing your stories. I don't think any of us want to hand a ticket to the federal government to do immigration enforcement against people that have had their dignity taken away from them and have involuntarily entered the sex trade. And so I also feel particularly bad because my colleague from San Francisco has really been demonized for doing the right thing in attempting to protect the LGBTQ plus community and to make it very clear that the penalties have disproportionately fallen on people who least deserve it. And so let me just say that to me, the issue with this bill, and I want to thank the author for picking up the gauntlet in the assembly because it's not an easy bill to pick up and then say I'm going to run it. But the whole issue between loitering and sex trafficking is concerning. I will support the bill today, but the bill comes to a propes next, or at some point, and at the current time I chair that committee. I'd like to think we can have conversations and we can rectify what I think are going to be some difficult issues. And again, I do want to say that I did criminal defense work for 25 years, so how you write the law becomes very, very important, and how its application gets interpreted is just as important. And the immigration issue, I think, is something we've got to understand a little bit better. My analysis was exactly the same analysis that was given here, which is crime of moral turpitude becomes interpretable, and this is not a good federal system to have interpreting that particular issue right now. And so, and again, that goes to the loitering issue, not necessarily the other issue. So I'm gonna vote for it today because I think it needs to move. But I think there are further conversations that need to be had, and I look forward to having those conversations. I think there are. This legislature is trying to get it right, and we don't always get everything right, but I think that this is too important not to get right. So, thank you very much for the opportunity to vote on this because I do think it's an important bill.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Wiener, and then Cortese.
Just very briefly, thank you for those comments, Senator Caballero, and you've always been a great ally and partner on so many of these issues over time, and you've taken some very hard votes over the years. I do just want to, in terms of Senator Ciardo's comments, which I appreciate, 16 and 17-year-olds should be protected. The solicitation piece addresses that very specifically. I want to just to clarify, the loitering part of the bill is not limited to minors. It's everyone, and just to make sure that everyone is clear. And I also just want to really, again, thank the author for, trying to address this in Assembly Public Safety, getting a little blown up for it. And now you're
still here.
You're being a leader and trying to navigate this, and I know we'll have continuing conversations. So thank you.
Thank you. Senator Cortese.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I had to catch up a little bit on the agenda today on relatively short notice, doing extra duty here today. But I want to associate my comments, and so as not to repeat, with Senator Caballero. I appreciate what Senator Weiner is talking about. Most of my experience around the victimization issue is what I would call it. It has been in local government where we had, to deal with trafficking from a law enforcement standpoint, sometimes around major events. For example, Super Bowl 50 comes to mind in Santa Clara County. And the issue really that gets blurred is all too often the victim is the one that gets arrested as opposed to otherwise. So I am sensitive to the issues that have been raised, but I believe to get it right, all the more reason to move it along here, because we have, as a couple of my colleagues have said, we have an opportunity in at least one committee and perhaps on the floor, to continue to work with the author, work with each other to land in the right place. That's all I have to say today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Senator Cortese. Any additional comments or questions? If not, I'll turn it back over to the bill author, Assembly Chairman Schultz, my colleague in the State Assembly, to close on the bill, and then we're entering a motion afterwards.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief in my remarks. I just want to thank the committee for all of your comments, your work on the matter, and look forward to continuing in good faith and earnestness those conversations around the loitering piece. With regards to Senator Sayarto's comments, I did want to just comment on a couple quick things, not in direct response to your comments, sir, but because there is so much misinformation out there, I did feel it appropriate to set AB 379 in the context of accurate information to the public. There's been a lot of discussion around human trafficking, and I do just want to note, to the credit of the senator from Bakersfield, human trafficking was included in Senate Bill 1414. Victims of human trafficking have been protected under the statutory framework of SB 1414 from last year. This bill really focuses, at least the solicitation piece, on individuals who are not necessarily victims of human trafficking, but who are underage and engaged in the commercial sex industry and protecting those children. It might seem like a finer point, but it is important because as our colleague from San Francisco mentioned, there's been so many implications and suggestions out in the media that our children are unprotected, and that's not true. The second thing I would note is that with regards to the protection of children, you've heard me say it in the Assembly, and I'll say it here. I would encourage everyone to look at Penal Code Section 288.3. If you contact a minor of any age in the state of California for oral copulation or any sort of sexual activity, that is a crime punishable as a felony. And I would also encourage everyone to look at the data from the Department of Justice. This code section that we're dealing with in this bill, which was also dealt with in SB 1414, was used less than 10 times in 2023 to conduct an arrest in the state of California, whereas Penal Code Section 288.3 has been used hundreds of times. I bring up that point to say that any suggestion by any party to state that absent this bill there's no protection for children in California, nothing could be further from the truth, and that sort of disinformation needs to be called out. And lastly, I would just mention that with respect to my colleague, I view AB 379, the current version, as a much stronger, more comprehensive bill than the original version of 379. I wouldn't categorize it as watered down, because what 379 now does that the original version didn't do was ensure that businesses that are quite frankly looking the other way and fueling this industry and providing a mechanism for these people to be trafficked, now they have some skin in the game and they have to be held to account. And we have an enforcement structure to provide for that. We also have enhanced financial support for survivors, and the vertical prosecution grant program will do incredible work for district attorneys across the state to combat this phenomenon. So with that, I appreciate all of the comments and the work of you, Mr. Chair, and respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you very much, Senator Schultz. Entertain a motion on AB 379? Okay, moved by Cortese. The motion is due pass to the Senate Committee on Appropriations. If the committee system will call the roll.
AB 379 Schultz. Araguin.
Aye.
Araguin, aye. Sayarto.
Aye.
Sayarto, aye. Caballero.
Aye.
Caballero, aye. Cortese.
Aye.
Cortese, aye. Perez. Wiener. Wiener, aye.
Okay, we'll keep that bill on call.